So Abigail Spanberger, a few days out from the election in Virginia, has to this point kind of avoided the trans topic like all Democrats do now. But now she's finally answered it, sort of, although not really. And just to show you how terrified Democrats are to say anything intelligible about this topic, I want you to listen to how Spanberger handles this when she's asked about it. This apparently is on Katie Couric's YouTube channel. So listen to this.
And I think the real challenge is there's a lot of people who've never met a trans person, whether they're a trans youth or an adult, and so there's a real effort to engage in some level of fear mongering. And I really do believe that we should, as a society as a whole, demonstrate a fair amount of grace to people who are confused about, when we're talking about bathrooms or when we're talking about sports participation, like what are we talking about? And I recognize, and I'm a parent. I've got 3 daughters in Virginia public schools, and so I understand the fact that there may be confusion about what is my opponent, as a very clear example, kind of threatening, and importantly, the willingness to fearmonger with or against kids who are trying to figure out who they are, who are in a challenging point in their life. Middle school and high school isn't easy for most people, let alone if you might be struggling with or trying to come to terms with your identity. And so just as a basic issue of principle, I do find it really objectionable that, that there would be kids who turn on the television and is in an effort to attack me, see, images of themselves sort of reflected as a villain.
Okay, so I've transcribed the key part of Abigail's answer, if you can call it an answer. And here's what she said. I really do believe that we should, as a society as a whole, demonstrate a fair amount of grace to people who are confused about, when we're talking about bathrooms or when we're talking about sports, what are we talking about? And, I recognize, and I'm a parent, I've got 3 daughters in Virginia public schools, and so I understand that there may be confusion about, what is my opponent, as a very clear example, kind of threatening. And importantly, the willingness to fearmonger with or against kids who are, trying to figure out who they are. That's a verbatim transcript. And as I read it, I feel like I'm having a stroke. I feel like Joe Biden. I feel like I've contracted dementia somehow. Now, we know based on context clues that Spanberger is attempting to say that she's okay with dudes in the girls' bathroom. That's her position. That's what she's attempting to sort of gesture towards that position. But the actual answer is incoherent. I mean, those aren't even sentences. Fear-mongering with or against kids? What? Fear-mongering with kids? I understand there may be confusion about what is my opponent, as a very clear example, kind of threatening. I understand there may be confusion about what is my opponent, as a very clear example, kind of threatening. That's not a sentence. Those are words, but they don't mean anything. There's no way to even make sense of that. Well, I do know what it means. It means that you, Abigail Spanberger, know that trans ideology is total nonsense, and you're afraid to give any one single soundbite that supports it, but you also aren't going to come out against it because you're a coward, and you're also a bad mother who would sacrifice your own daughters to some creepy dude in the bathroom before you would take a stand that upsets your Democrat base and your Democrat donors. That's what it means. I mean, that's the actual content of what you're saying, but when you take the words at face value, it doesn't mean anything at all. But that really is the game. That's why when Democrats, when they talk about this issue now, their objective is to not say anything that could be used in a soundbite. Right? That's their objective. And it wasn't always that way. Now, Democrats, ever since trans became a thing, their stance on this topic has been nonsensical. Of course, because it's a nonsensical position. But It used to be that they weren't afraid of the sound bites, so they would at least say, they would at least utter clear sentences, and they would say stuff like, well, we believe in trans rights. Trans rights are human rights. We should treat these trans women with dignity. They'd say stuff like that. That doesn't really, again, it doesn't mean anything, actually, but it's at least like on its own, you can understand those sentences pieced together. So it's a coherent sentence, at least, even if what it's trying to convey doesn't make any sense. But now they don't even want to give you a coherent sentence. They don't want to have any sentence on the record that on its own would indicate that they actually support this. And so they just kind of dance around and they say sentences like this that you can't even clip that and make it into a soundbite because anyone who hears it, they're not going to know what that means. And that's really the objective, of course. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.